All right. In this session of the Writers Craft Summit, I'm speaking with Karen Dimmick. Karen, welcome to the summit.
Thank you. Hello.
So Karen, you are the host of your own summit, the Book Marketing Summit.
Yep.
Where can
And
people
you
learn?
interviewed me on it.
Yes, it was a thrill to be part of it. And where can people learn more about that summit?
That's at thebookmarketingsummit.com.
Perfect. All right. And one of the reasons, other than it's always just a lovely pleasure to speak with you, that I wanted to get you on this summit is because you are the author of 47 Hacks for Writers. No, did I get it right? I missed Mind Hacks. 47 Mind. I'm reading it and I still get it. I've read the book twice. I have it in front of me and I'm still getting it wrong. It's because there's numbers involved. My mind, I'm like
that bad, huh?
super genius when it comes to words, and I'm like kindergarten level the second a number gets dropped in. Can't handle anything. So Karen, you're the author of 47 Mind Hacks for Writers, an excellent book all about mindset. And so this summit is about the art form, the craft of writing, but I think even before you get into the very earliest stages of the craft, there's these mindset issues that you need to address and be aware of. And it's not like you just solve them and then you're good. You're going to, it's ongoing, obviously, but I think it's such a huge part of success as an author, or success almost in anything. So maybe before we get into some specific mindset hacks that we're going to get into in our discussion, tell me a little bit about how you discovered this topic and why you decided to write a book about it for writers.
Well, I've always been fascinated with it. I mean, I remember growing up and sort of reading everything I could about the brain, even as, sort of like a little kid, preteen kind of thing. Everything I could find about neurology, I was like getting into, and I'm like, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. And then I grew up and I sort of started my first science class and I did my first dissection, and I'm like, I'm not going to be a brain surgeon. Not for anything. So it kind of sort of veered off in another route. And I just ended up being absolutely fascinated with sort of psychology, and I studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I studied hypnosis, and then I actually ended up studying neurology as well because I became a chiropractor for a while, and I just found it absolutely fascinating as to why people do what they do and why they believe what they do and how their actions are driven by what it is they believe. And I just find it amazing that some people can sort of like just believe one thing and go ahead and achieve stuff, and other people can be totally derailed by a belief, and yet they've both got the same abilities.
And do you think writers in particular struggle with mindset issues more so than people in other fields?
I don't know about more so, but I think creative people in general, it sort of tends to be, you get that kind of creative wave where it's sort of like, up and down more so than sort of the strictly really logical people sort of thing, sort of in business. They don't tend to show it as much. It can still derail them just as much, but I don't think they show it as much as creative people because we're more used to sort of expressing ourselves. So it kind of comes out.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, pretty much. Most often not, but yes.
So your book is filled with tons of great tips. Let's dig into a couple of them here. And I think the very first one that I'd love to hear your thoughts on are this idea that I'm not good enough. Someone watching this summit, they have this inner fraud speaking up who's saying, I can't even call myself a writer. I'm not good enough. And this is something I've seen published authors struggle with as well. Oh yeah, I'm published, but my book's not nearly as good as so-and-so's book. So tell me about that.
Yeah, no, I find that absolutely amazing. And the start of that chapter actually has a quote from Agatha Christie saying the same thing. I mean, it goes right to the top that authors think they're not good enough. And the way to look at it is, not good enough compared to what? You're probably looking at your first draft thinking, well, this isn't good enough, and you're comparing it to, say, Agatha Christie's finished novel or Stephen King's finished novel. It's been through 20 rounds of editing or whatever it is they have to do. And, it's had a whole bunch of people looking at it and making it absolutely word by word perfect, and you're comparing your first draft to that thinking I'm not good enough. You're just comparing apples and oranges basically, and that's just never going to work for you. So ask yourself, when you come across that thought, I'm not good enough, fill in the blanks. I'm not good enough compared to what? And find out what it is you're actually comparing yourself to. And most likely you'll turn around and start laughing because you're like, I'm not good enough compared to, oh, J.K. Rowling. Oh, yeah, okay, that is probably a pretty stupid comparison, all things considered, you know? So
yeah, when I'm working with my clients, I always talk about these people that we love to compare ourselves to. J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, Virginia Woolf, like F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm like, these people aren't even human. They're like aliens from another planet. Like, if you're gonna compare yourself, at least compare yourself to another human. Like, those are the outliers of the outliers of the outliers, and yet those are the people we love to compare ourselves to.
And not only that, you know, you're probably not even comparing it to their first book. I mean, once you get 10 books down the line, if you compare your 10th book to your first book, you'll look back at it and think, oh my goodness, I really didn't know what I was doing, you know, but at the time you did the best you could. So at least compare yourself if you're on book one to someone else's book one first draft, and then think, actually, maybe it is pretty good, you know?
And I always use this example of The Great Gatsby, which a lot of people think is one of the greatest books ever written. And the hilarious thing is that's one people are going to compare themselves to. But I think the follow-up, Tender is the Night, is a disaster. I don't think it's a good book at all. And so even Fitzgerald, after writing the greatest novel ever, struggled, at least in my mind, with the follow-up. And so not only are we comparing ourselves to these super outliers, not only are we comparing our first draft of our first book to their polished draft of their greatest book, we're also not even comparing ourselves to like their anything less than their utter great stuff. So it's ridiculous.
It is. But you see it, I mean, it's in our society when you think about like social media and stuff, we do it there as well. You know, you're sitting there thinking, I'm having a really bad day. You know how bad your day is, and you know kind of what's going through your mind and all the negative thoughts and, you know, sort of how, you know, you're not good enough and so on. And then you're looking at somebody else's social media profile and they're going, I'm having a fantastic day. You're basically comparing your raw work to their finished product. And that's where I think most authors fall down the most.
And I think that can lead really nicely into the next hack, because I think there's this idea of homogenization when you look at social media. Like, not only do we have to post how perfect our life is, it's like a certain model of a perfect life that we're putting out there, right?
Along with the cat video,
yeah. So how can people embrace their difference, and how can people acknowledge that what they know is perhaps different than what anyone else knows, and is unique and special and worth putting out into the world, even if it's not like what you're seeing everyone else doing?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we're all unique. We've all had different experiences. I'm not the same as you. I wasn't born in the same place. I didn't grow up learning the same things you learned. So my experiences are going to be very different to yours. And that's going to come across in my work, unless I'm trying to write a book like yours, you know, sort of thing, as in trying to model you, in which case I'm a second-rate you. I can only ever be a first-rate me. And it's the same with everyone else. You've got to put your experiences in. And I actually learned this quite well with like nonfiction. For a while, I did websites with my husband. He does that. And for a while, it was like, we've got a blog and we've got to really put out these amazing articles that are really going to show people we know what we're talking about. And then someone comes up and goes, but why do I need a strong password? And you're like, really? And it's like, they don't know what you know. To us, it's obvious as to why you need a strong password, but they don't know that. They don't understand that. And it's the same when it comes to fiction. In my novel that I'm sort of just finishing at the moment, I'm writing about a healer, because I write fantasy. And I'm writing about a healer. And so I've described, with my years of doing sort of the NLP, the energy healing, the chiropractic, and so on, I have a very different viewpoint on healing to most people. And so I'm able to describe what I see when I do any healing. And I've just got the notes back from the first beta reader. And he's like, oh my goodness, it was such a unique take on healing. I've never seen anything like it before. And if I hadn't put my experience into that, he'd never have seen that. That would now never be out in the world. Everyone else is the same. There's always something that you have a unique perspective on, because no one else is you. No one else has had your life experiences. learned what you've learned, anything, your beliefs even, everything you do and everything about you colors what you do. And somewhere along the line, you're going to find that little kernel of something that's you that you can put in a book and everyone will go, oh, wow, I've never heard that before. And it'll just bring your novel to life.
Yeah, I think what we take as the mundane can be the extraordinary for other people. Just as you were thinking, I was thinking of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf and Ulysses by James Joyce, which are both two books about just regular people and just about a day in their lives where nothing all that extraordinary happens. And yet these are two of the greatest works of modernist literature.
Yeah.
Because Mrs. Dalloway's life in 1917 England is so different from my life. And even Virginia Woolf could have said, oh, I can't write about Mrs. Dalloway. Nothing extraordinary happens. It's just a regular woman. Well, a regular woman to Virginia Woolf is like extraordinary to me. And so I think that's what you're getting at, right? This idea that like, just because your life is, these things seem normal and obvious to you doesn't mean if you can authentically communicate them in a story, they're not going to be fascinating for other people.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite books is the Harry Potter series, not surprisingly, being into fantasy. If you think about it, from like Ron's point of view and Ron's father's point of view, they'd never seen a plug. And there's, sort of Ron's dad going, oh my goodness. And Harry's like, it's a plug. That's what will come across. There's stuff that in your life that you think, well, yeah, so the other people are going, wow, you know that. And it's silly things. It's always stuff that you take for granted. So put you in there.
And I think that's going to be a theme that's going to emerge over this whole summit, because when we're talking about different aspects of craft, there's like the appearance of like template or formula, like this is story structure, this is genre, this is character. And yet when you bring your own unique difference and your personality to those frameworks and structures, it becomes totally different than anything that's done before. You and I could both write books about a boy who goes to a school of witchcraft and wizardry. And my book and your book and J.K. Rowling's book are all going to be completely different because of our own unique lens through which we see the world.
Exactly. And there was actually one that did that. It wasn't a boy, it was a girl. And she went to witch school that was around before Harry Potter. It was a big series in England. And I remember sort of watching that. And she wrote something totally different that took the world by storm. And yet, same premise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about another one. And this one I think is so important because so many of clients that I've worked with, this could be a huge, huge one for them. And that's the ability to focus. You've got over some of these I'm not good enough struggles maybe. You've set some goals, you're working on the book, but life gets in the way. And we have I think more so than ever in human history, probably we have more distractions, more pressures, more things pulling our attention away. What can a writer do to focus on their work?
Well, there's quite a lot of things. I mean, first off is having an area that you work and making that you, so that anyone in your house, if you've got kids, your spouse, whatever, they know that when you sit down and do that, that you're out. You're off limits, unless it's obviously an emergency, then fine, you don't mind. But if it's like, I want a cookie, then, you're not there. And if it's a case of you can't shut a door and put a little sign up saying I'm working, then get a hat. I know I've seen it done before. Get a baseball hat, put it on your head, teach the kids that when you're wearing this baseball hat, you're not to be disturbed unless it's an emergency. Doing all sorts of things like that. You've got the internet, shut down, social media and stuff like that. Just make it so that you've got whatever it is you use to write, Scrivener, whatever, up on your computer and nothing else, so that you can't do research. When you come to the point where you want to do some research, you put, little star, research this, go back and do it another time, not in your writing time. And I think the best way is just to doing like sprints. I don't know if you've heard of the Pomodoro technique. I don't actually use that, but I use something similar because my mum actually sort of started this when I was well, about 4 or 5, and she decided that I had to do my homework and I was going to concentrate. And she got a little sort of alarm clock thing and put it on the desk and said, you have to concentrate for 4 minutes. And every day she made it slightly longer. By the time I got to sort of 7 years old, it was about half an hour. And I hadn't like worked that out, that she was making it longer. I just thought, it's just taking longer than normal, so it's okay, I can carry on, kind of thing. And I went until that bell went. And so I've kind of gotten used to doing that. But it's essentially the Pomodoro. You do work for 25 minutes. You have a little alarm that's, tells you when to finish. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to look at the time. And you just write as fast as you can and get it all down. And then at 25 minutes, you have a rest. And then you go back and you can repeat it. And you can do 2, 3, 4, whatever you want, really, whatever suits your lifestyle. Because there's no way that you can do other things as well. So you can't just look at the internet and then come back and write a bit, talk to the kids, come back, write a bit, pick up a phone call, come back. Your brain takes a certain amount of time to get into whatever it is you're doing. And so the more breaks you have, the longer it takes you to actually get anything done. And if you want an experiment like this, and for all those of you watching this, get a piece of paper and a pen out. And what you're going to do is you're going to write 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10 on one line. Underneath it, under the 1, you're going to write an A, B, C, D, all the way to J in one line. And you're going to time yourself. So start the timer, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and then stop the timer. And it'll probably be, 7 or 8 seconds, I'm guessing here, but it'll be short. Then what you're going to do to show yourself just how difficult it is to multitask is you're going to write 1, A, 2, B, 3, C, and so on. And you're going to switch between the 2 lines, and you're going to go all the way to the end until you've got 10, J. And you will find, unless you're, an alien, you will find that will take you easily twice as long. And it is absolutely eye-opening when you do it like that, because you're thinking, 1, okay, now I've got to get for letters. What's the next letter? Oh, yeah, A. And then numbers. Oh, yeah, 2. And B. And it is absolutely mind-opening, mind-blowing when you do it. So give it a go and time it. See how long it takes you. And that is what multitasking is costing you in your writing, if you're doing it that way.
And I think that's, of all the wonderful things that technology and smartphones have brought into our lives, I think it's propagated this belief that we're all great multitaskers, right? Oh, I can watch my kids and go through Twitter at the same time, as you've said, you know the science better than me, but my understanding is the science has just proved time and time again, we're not good multitaskers. We can tell ourselves we are, but we're not.
We are not. Nerves work by way of sending sort of pulses up by, bringing chemicals in and then pushing chemicals out. And that's what, makes the pulse go up. And so if you're doing one area of your brain for this and then another area of the brain for that, you've got a long line of a nerve that it's got to go all the way up and then not that one and then all the way up to there. And instead of just, carrying on in the one direction, multitasking is not something that humans do, or not to any, sort of, anywhere good that they'd like to be able to do it to.
Well, while we're on this topic of focus and sustained work, I didn't speak to you about this beforehand, but I'm so curious to ask you. I know you're working on your first fiction novel right now.
Yes. And
my understanding is you wrote an extraordinary amount of writing for your first draft in a very short period of time. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm at 158,000 words and I did it in 3 months.
Which is incredible. So I saw that on Facebook. In my mind, I went, wow, amazing. But now that I've got you here, tell me your secret. I'm sure clearly focus was one part of that, but how were you able to get so much work done in such a short period of time?
I have worked out that I am somewhat of a pantser, but I have to plan to a certain extent to begin with. So I actually read K.M. Weiland's books about how to structure a novel. And I went through and I did, sort of inciting incident, first plot point, and then, sort of the the reaction at the beginning act 2, and then the midpoint, and then, you know, sort of the action, and then third plot point and climax. And I worked out where I wanted to be for all of those. So I knew I had a character, and I knew what I wanted sort of like theme wise. I knew the genre I wanted to write in and stuff. And so I worked out what needed to come at those plot points. And I didn't really plot it out much more detail than that. And then it was a NaNoWriMo thing. So 1st of November came, and I'm like, I'm really excited about this character. Let's start typing. And I knew I had to, you know, hit those points, and she tells you exactly what percentage you have to hit them at. So that really helped. And so then once I'd hit the first one, I knew that was 12%, and therefore the novel was going to be such and such a, you know, sort of word length. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I just got into the story, and I just found it sort of wrote itself, really. I feel like I'm almost being sort of dictated to. I'm sort of just typing away as fast as I can. And I spent a lot of hours every day just typing away, and just made it my full-time job for a bit, because I don't have kids. So, you know, I don't have that problem. And my husband's sort of like working, and he's, you know, sort of just on that desk over there, sort of typing away on his stuff. So, you know, I was just had the liberty to just be able to type and get it out there. So yeah, really.
How did you maintain your energy levels through that?
I find it picks me up.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I can come in feeling absolutely drained and awful if I've had a lousy night's sleep, and writing will just pick me up. So I feel better for writing.
I hate you so much right now. There's different types of writers, right? And a lot of people, they'll say, you know, Kevin, you've written all these books and you're a writing coach and stuff. You must just love it. And every word is like pulling teeth. It's just, I was talking about, for me, writing a book is like building a brick wall. It's like, okay, one more brick, one more brick. I love having written, and I do, you know, I love losing myself in the process of writing, but boy, it takes a lot out of me, and it feels like work a lot of the time.
Oh, wow. For me, it's the exact opposite, actually. And I remember my first book, sort of, I had a book buddy kind of thing. We were sort of helping each other on with this book. And I finished that book, and I sort of started to get a bit grumpy, and we're like, you know, going through the marketing phase, which I like, but I don't love. And hence why I sort of like tried to ask for other people's opinions on how to do it. And so I sort of got through that. And then one day I came in, and I was like all smart. He's like, "You're writing another book, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yep."
Well, maybe that can bring us around to our last one here, which is this idea of don't do it alone. You had someone that you were encouraging you and working with. Tell me about that. A lot of these writers out here are perhaps, they don't know anyone else who's ever written a book, or anyone who's trying to write a book, or they think the writer is like this lone figure who has to be like off in a cabin somewhere, like removed from society or whatever. Tell me about this idea of don't do it alone.
You have to have a team. There is no way a creative person can go through that sort of emotional wave without having someone to back them up. Because when you hit the bottom, if you're on your own, you're going to give up. It's as simple as that. You need someone, and it doesn't matter who it is. You can have, you know, husband, friends. You can have a writing coach like Kevin. You can have an accountability partner. You can just friends who read in your genre and understand your genre, just to bounce your ideas off, because otherwise you end up just writing yourself into a corner and either thinking this is brilliant or this is rubbish, and you've got absolutely zero perspective on what's going on, and no one's helping you, you know, sort of keep you going. You need those other people. It is absolutely vital.
I think this is one of the places in our society where Hollywood and the book industry are so different, where in Hollywood, you watch any movie, there's 10 minutes of credits going up at the end. There's everyone from like the actors to like the guy who cleaned the garbage on set, right? Yes. It gets his name and the credits there, thousands of people. And yet in the book industry, for some reason, we take the author, we throw their name on the cover, and we pretend they did it all by themselves.
I know, it's insane.
No one, except for people in the industry, know how many hands were involved, how much help that author got, how no one accomplishes anything in life all by themselves.
No. I mean, you for one thing, you have to have an editor. I can't, you don't want to put a book out there without an editor, however good your English is. You can be looking at these things. And with my novel, I went through and I did my self edit, which I always do before I give it to an editor, because that's just good practice. And I went through and I thought, right, I've picked up, I've done the spell check, I've picked up every possible mistake. And then while I'm waiting for the beta readers before the editor, it hasn't actually gone through its copy edit yet. My mum read it. And she came back with something like 47 different errors that I'd missed, sort of like me instead of my, and to instead of, so. And you do not see these things. So you need an editor, and you need someone who can help you proofread. You need to have a professional cover. And unless you design covers for a day job, do not do your own cover. And even then, probably don't do your own cover because you don't have the perspective. But if you don't, and even if you're a graphic designer, the typography, mixing it with the picture, is a real art form. So graphic designers themselves can't even create good covers, let alone good covers for their book. So you need someone who will do that. I'm actually getting someone to write my book description, because while I can write it for nonfiction, it's just sort of fairly basic, copywriting stuff. For fiction, that's a whole nother ballgame, and I have no clue what I'm doing. So I'm hiring that one out. You need someone to help you with a website. Thankfully, I have my husband for that one. So he's doing that one.
Well, let's give them a plug then. Where, if there's authors watching this who need a website, where should they go check that out?
They can go to authorwebsitecentral.com. And
love it. All right.
Yeah. So he's doing that. And then I've got a friend, because I wanted a picture of a dragon because, well, it's part of my book. And so I found this perfect one, and I cannot contact the author. Whatever I do, they're just not answering. And it's been like 4 years since they've been on DeviantArt and so on. So I've got a friend who's an artist, and I'm like, I want something, sort of that kind of pose. Can you do something, Because there's no stock images that have that kind of pose. It's driving me nuts. So, there are so many different people, and it's not just to do with the writing, it's just the whole publishing of the book. And then, maybe you don't want to then market it. Maybe you get someone else to come in and do the AMS ads for you and so on. There's a whole lot you need help with.
Absolutely. And at every stage of the way as well. Like what you're talking about is more on the production side of things, but even just to get through the process of writing a book, like you mentioned, your mom read through a copy, like my wife's read a version of probably 3 versions of everything I've ever written, right? Like there are those people in your lives who contribute and who are a part of it. So if anyone's watching this and they're thinking it all has to be on their shoulders and they have to be some lone genius,
no,
not how it works.
Not how it works.
I mean, and you can look back to, I mentioned Virginia Woolf earlier, she was friends with E.M. Forster and other modernist authors. Tolkien had C.S. Lewis and the Inkley, like a lot of the most successful writers out there were part of little movements. The beat writers, Kerouac and Ginsberg, like Burroughs. It's not a coincidence that these people knew each other. They supported each other and encouraged each other and challenged each other, and were all the better for it by being
exactly. You have to have people who can look at your book. And I mean, for me, with my, just a beta reader who just happens to read a lot in my genre, and I gave him my book, having had it developmental edited by someone who also only edits within my genre. And this guy came back and said, it's this character. I keep forgetting who he is. I'm like, okay. I was kind of wondering, and I tried to beef him up. So now I'm going back and I'm sort of, beefing him up towards the end. So it really, sort of they remember who he is by the end of the book, because he's going to be a huge part of, another book. And so, all these little things that you just don't see. And even, once I've had 4 people so far go through the book before the beta reader happened along, and he still came up with, 2 or 3 different things that, I didn't like this or about it, or this didn't kind of come across well, and this character's getting forgotten, and all that stuff. It's just another pair of eyes, just makes all the difference.
And, I think one other thing that ties into this, doing this summit, it's on my mind right now, but it's that we so often focus on this idea of our book selling, making us money. Maybe we can quit our day job, or we can go to Hollywood, or blah, 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 blah. But the thing I always say is that the thing you don't anticipate is how publishing a book can just change your life by opening up opportunities to be part of things, to meet people. You know, I'd never be hosting this summit and speaking to you right now if I'd never written a book. And so that's the other aspect of it, is that in being an author and pursuing you know, a literary life or whatever, relationships can support that, but that can also support the development of relationships. You know, through the summit, I'm talking to 25 or 30 different amazing people, all because I wrote a book and they wrote a book, and that enriches your life so much, so much.
Oh, it really does. Yeah. I mean, I was, when I first sort of started trying to do my summit, I knew no one in the industry. I mean, I'd taken people's courses, and I was at the time writing nonfiction. So I'd taken like Steve Scott's course, and, you know, I think I had about 4 or 5 different courses going, and I didn't know them, you know, but I sort of phoned them up and said, you know, I'm running this summit, any chance? And I'm now on email terms with them, and I can sort of contact them and say, hi, by the way, I'm doing this. Would you write the foreword? Oh, yeah, no problem. And it's made such a difference. And all because I wrote that first book. You know, you wouldn't do it without.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for coming on the summit. I think this is such an important topic. And as we said at the beginning, it kind of sets you up for learning about the writing process and doing the drafting process. But it also is something you're going to struggle with on your 3rd book and your 4th book and your 10th book. And so I'm so glad you were here to share some tips and to dig in this material with the audience. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.